KSRadio, we're tuning in to change.
Amazing. Welcome to The Gifts Within Adversity with me, Stella Grace. The foundation and the inspiration behind The Gifts Within Adversity is about talking to a range of people. I have an amazing range of eclectic guests who come on and join us to share their story and to talk about how they either support a number of other people in some way, really inspirationally, or they've been through some challenge of their own and they're sharing their story. So I have one of these incredible people here with me today who's supported many, many people for many years. McKenna, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you've got a wealth of experience to share. Thank you so much for coming on. And would you like to say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, my name's McKenna, or Dr. McKenna from a professional role. I just firstly like to say thank you. Pretty humbled to be asked to do this, Stella, so thank you
You're welcome.
for giving me this opportunity. My background really is I work as a clinical psychologist. The particular area that I work is clinical health psychology. And that really is to do with the health is the body and the clinical bit is to do with the mind. So the population that we work with are anyone who gets a health diagnosis.
Okay.
And obviously that impacts the mind and the mood and the life. We work with them to help cope with that, deal with it, adjust, and that's what I do as my day job, and that spans pretty much any health condition. Within the service, it's any health condition, and so I work as a lead of part of that service, and that's anybody of adult age, say, that doesn't have cancer, as a separate service. I think that's the main exclusion criteria. The rest, if it's any other physical health condition, come to us. One of my specialist areas of interest is working within the sphere of weight management, obesity. Okay. So that's kind of it's my strongest area of interest. Yeah. That's where I did my PhD before doing my clinical training. So been doing that for, been working in psychology from 2003 and a practitioner psychologist since 2010.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that is a huge span of years, and I imagine a phenomenal amount of people that you have touched their lives in that time in an area.
Few people.
Yeah. Have you got a rough idea of how many?
I wouldn't have an idea.
No idea. But in 21 years, we can safely say you've touched many, many people's lives.
Of about 14 years clinically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I bet you've seen so many journeys in that time. It's just, huge. I imagine, having worked with people before, not in a psychologist role, but with youth and community work and specifically drugs work, it's quite a privilege actually in many ways. Not always easy, but I found a real privilege of building rapport with, in my case it was teenagers, over a long period of time, to build that trust, to enable the growth and the discussions and the support that is then needed before you can even do any work. You have to have that connection with people, don't you? And it's a real privilege to connect with people in that way because, I guess really, to put it maybe very simply, we can't ask or support people to change without having some kind of connection with them first.
Of course.
Really, I imagine that's been really, really humbling.
It has, to be honest. It was just those 2 points around connection and trust and the privilege of working in that space, where I think it was the privilege really that really got me, I suppose, hooked into particularly obesity.
Okay.
And that was true. Doing my research, and there's a whole backstory explaining in a bit, but the hook that really really opened my mind about individual struggles with obesity was in Ireland, and one of the National Obesity Services. I was doing my research and PhD on obesity and looking at the impacts between what we call explicit attitudes, which are attitudes that we would say right now explicitly, verbally on a questionnaire, versus what we call implicit attitudes, which are either unconscious or attitudes that we suppress. And often there's a whole range of psychological tools to assess, usually reaction time based tools to assess those attitudes that we often like to suppress for social presentation reasons. I want to present myself in a certain way, or just we may be a little bit cut off or in a state of denial from those reasons, for many psychological reasons. But I was doing that research, and I had the privilege of being granted access to working with individuals struggling with obesity, and actually, ironically, sitting in. I got the privilege of sitting in and doing some assistant psychology work, sitting in those rooms with individuals telling their stories, and it just absolutely blew my mind, because it was, the only way I can describe it is it's like an iceberg. You just see the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
But the whole context underneath is hidden. And that hidden context, pretty much many of the population, thankfully they're becoming more aware through education, but are completely unaware to this human being's context of why they are and where they are, why they are in this particular place. And I found that it was just the vulnerability of hearing those stories. It made me so aware of the stigma and shame and ignorance that we hold. And it really brought up a sense of compassion for me about, actually, there's a whole population of misunderstood individuals here.
Wow.
Are getting labelled, going, yeah, you're not moving enough, you're eating too much, it's your fault, you're to blame. And actually, it's a huge Pandora's box under there.
Wow.
And yeah, I think fundamentally that experience really made me kind of want to do better for those individuals.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is phenomenal. And I love that. And I really feel that that compassion, and that, again, that can only really come from that human connection and understanding what might be really going on for somebody.
Yeah.
And, there's a TED talk I love that reminds me it's not about obesity, but around addiction. And it's termed that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. Because when there's addiction or those, deep issues as to why someone wants to distract and escape that much. It's, they're not feeling connected to themselves, to someone else, to their lives, and that's a huge, like you say, that is very much, we see the tip of the iceberg often. And then we have this real, like you said, privilege to work with people on a deeper level. And again, now in my spiritual work, I'm often talking to people about what else is going on, and the energetics, as well as what we're thinking and feeling, and holistic health. So it's really interesting to me to hear you term it like that. And yeah, I maybe hadn't given those kind of thoughts either. I understand that things are very multifaceted. So I'm guessing as well, when you're working with somebody and they have all that unconscious stuff themselves sometimes, it's also not even all theirs, is it? We've got so much out there in terms of consumerism and conditioning and how we're sold things, and, again, attitudes and judgments. So it's compounded by so much, isn't it?
Yeah. Particularly struggles with food. Food is the outcome. It's a symptom of a bigger context. And working with the British Psychological Society, one of our projects a couple of years ago was to put out was to bring really that context to start shaping that context and bring it into consciousness. to disseminate for clinicians and government and local bodies to help bring the awareness that of the psychological, so many multifaceted aspects related to obesity. For example, one of the thing that we do know is that it's a biological, psychological, social, environmental problem. And the one thing that we do know is that it doesn't have one cause and it doesn't have one solution.
Yeah.
And what it does come from is that you have a group of individuals who come from a place of often, not always, but often a place of deprivation of love in their environment growing up, or deprivation of access to a healthy environment socially, where they live. And when you couple that with an individual's psychological and biological world, there's many different ways that can go. But for a big proportion of individuals that, with those contexts, they can learn to use food in a way that functions for them when they're younger, as a way of keeping them safe, in control, and nurturing.
Yeah.
But as one, grows older, those beliefs and behaviours become more and more evident, but also more and more destructive.
Yeah.
And I think for me, working with those, that work we done with the BPS was to kind of shift the blame that actually this isn't an individual's problem. I'm at fault. I'm the problem of just eating too much just because I agreed or there's something wrong with me. But actually, there's a huge bigger context.
Yeah.
And that needs a multifaceted approach right through from where we live, schools, needs support around stigma, support around helping individuals integrate as a human being, about their mind, their body, their feelings, and it needs all the way through the healthcare. It's a healthcare system. It's a societal problem because in a simplistic way, we're doing statistically the equivalent of a marathon of a marathon's worth of exercise that we're not doing every week as human beings, just because of our context shift change in the last 50, 60 years. So we're not cycling to work, we're not doing manual jobs, we're not washing our clothes by hand.
Yeah.
And you couple that with a more stressful society, more levels of deprivation, higher levels of relative difference in wealth, and cheaper access to food than we've ever had.
Yeah.
So the human body is designed to be stimulated by food. It's absolutely normal. But if we're not giving people the nurturing to make them feel safe within themselves and within the world they live, it's only normal that people are going to want to, through shame and difference, want to inebriate from what that brings up.
Yeah.
And food's only one way of doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's many, many ways to distract and self-medicate, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's so much there. I'm sure we could talk for many, many hours, but I just really love this idea and this expansion of a place from a shift from blame, personal, individual blame. So we're in a real blame culture as well, aren't we? Not just legally, but, down to the individual. And like you say, there is an absolute stack of factors that aren't supportive, aren't conducive to healthy well-being. Yes, we there are holistic approaches and there are well-being circles and all of these things, and that there is lots of that out there. But also, as you say, it's around our food. We're not encouraged. There's so many great points you mentioned, but I also thought about we're not as, I think things shifted after lockdown for us to grow our own a bit more.
Okay.
But generally, we have been living in such times of convenience, haven't we? I mean, go to the supermarket, all of the sugary stuff is, purposely at the checkouts. It's, things are very designed to make it easy for us to comfort eat and to self-medicate with food and alcohol and all the things. So yeah, there's a lot against being able to explore that depth, that inner depth, isn't there? There's actually a lot of factors going against giving you the opportunity, because in some ways it's very easy to reach for those things in this society.
Yeah.
And again, that if we think about this around the globe, this isn't mirrored everywhere, is it? In terms of the obesity links, there's some parts of the world that don't have those issues, and then there's other parts of the world that really do treat people with the support and a different approach. And I'm thinking of Portugal with the way they sanction the criminal system and the drug system is very different to here. So I'm branching off a little bit into the drugs world, but it's the same message for me around the support and the blame of the individual and how we're supporting them rather than sanctioning them, basically.
Yeah.
So I find that quite interesting.
Yeah. I'm not able to comment anyway on the drugs and alcohol, but what I can speak to is, I think fundamentally rates of obesity globally are increasing. And I think as human beings, we're getting a little more disconnected to ourselves, a little bit cut off, more and more cut off from ourselves and society, and where food comes from and what nourishes us a lot, really. The relationships that we have with others and relationships we have with ourselves. And I think a big part of, without going off on a complete tangent, but psychologically, we've been told that, and we've learned that if you don't like something, for example, in the physical world, so I'll say it like this: in the physical world, if we have a problem, two solutions are really great. And one is fix the problem. So, for example, if I break my leg or you break your leg, we can get it fixed, or we can avoid using it. Same in the physical world, in the sense of if we're in a building, in a house, and it gets a leak, well, we can get it fixed, or we can get out of the house, avoid it. And because of that, those two things being brilliant problem-solving strategies, we start applying it to our own human disposition, particularly our mind. And our mind applies it to itself. Well, if I don't really like this aspect of my life, this aspect of myself, thought, feeling, urge, or life aspect, what we do is we try to control it in an unhelpful way through avoidance. And that means kind of cut off from it psychologically, drink, smoke, eat too much, eat too little, procrastinate, you name it. We just get into a state of disconnect. We're not willing to have, or not willing to go towards those aspects of the self. And I think society's given that there's a lot of changes for the good, but there's also a lot of opportunities for individuals to be able to cut off.
Yeah.
And get our needs met in a more insular way.
Yeah, 100%.
And that has ramifications.
Yeah. And that is 100% the inspiration of, what we're doing here, really having these conversations, bringing awareness, having these, thoughts and discussions. And that's something I really love about Kind of Sound Radio. The ethos is very much about unity, spreading kindness and inspiration, hope. And I think we really need it. The world really needs it. Can't have too much of it, that's for sure. So we're going to come on to your first song choice. I'm really excited for the rest of the show, because we're going to talk a bit more about some of the incredible shifts you've seen over that time in a general sense, that I think is really going to be quite inspirational for the listeners as well. And we're going to maybe sprinkle in some of our kind of well-being antidotes as well.
Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, see if we can drum up some of those, because I'm excited to share some of our stories about surfing as well. So we can get that in.
Always happy to talk about that.
Yeah, it's that as well. We come on to the holistic wellbeing side, and I've got some really interesting questions for you as well about my thoughts on linking up the psychology and the spirituality aspect. So we're going to cover all that in the show and more.
Okay.
But your first song choice, Dire Straits, do you want to explain why it means something to you, or just like it? Does it have a meaning?
Yeah. Oh, many layers to it. Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms. It's, my dad, firstly. It's music that he really liked. He likes that classic rock sound, 70s, 80s, rock sound. And I suppose it makes me think of many things. It makes me think of my brother, who we'll talk about in a bit. But it makes me think of a static caravan we had in Donegal, which is the northwest of Ireland, and it was by the sea, and it was covered in a little mountains around it, little hills around it, and you could see the sea, and it's stunning, and it was a place of nourishment for my family. And that song, we had those Panasonic twin cassettes, and it was always in the cassette, and whenever I always left it with ready to play on that Brothers in Arms song. And as soon as I walked in, I pressed play, and it just brought me back to those experiences of my family, my dad, and my brother, and just that. Okay, this is a place of topping up, nourishing. So yeah, it brings that back to me.
I love that power of nourishment through music.
Yeah.
So that's another topic. Yeah. So amazing. Thank you so much, Django, for playing that one for us now.
Kinda Sound Radio, the station for a global community.
Welcome back to the Gifts Within Adversity with me, Stella Grace, and my lovely guest, Ian McKenna. We're talking all things psychology today and wellness, and many of the facets that are incredible and really thought-provoking about the issues that some people are facing and that are really good to kind of be aware of. We've talked about the blame culture and shifting responsibility onto, the wider scenario of the environmental factors and things that are going on around and within us. So we've had some really fascinating conversations so far. There's more to come. The Gifts Within Adversity airs every other Friday at 11, and it's made available as a podcast soon after, the week after, and you can catch up on Apple, Spotify, Audible, and now YouTube as well. It's very exciting. So lots of places to catch up if you miss us live on the Friday. We're also playing the show again and all shows again across the Kinda Sound team the following day at the same time. So you get another chance to catch up the next day. So let's get back into our fascinating topic. So we talked a lot about the background of your psychology work, how long-standing it's been. I'm just so fascinated about how many amazing shifts you must have seen with people in that time. And we're not going to talk about personal cases. Obviously, we keep our clients confidential. But in that time, you must have seen some incredible general shifts of people really moving on to a place of, increased wellness and connection. So we've spoken about that, haven't you? Would you like to say a bit more about those themes that you've witnessed and been a part of?
Yeah. From a general theme, we work from a place of really interaction, of unification, of mind and body. So for all the people that I've worked with and work with, that's our fundamental starting point, is to really help someone understand their mind history, their mental health history, their relationships, the context they've grown up in psychologically, and then their body history. And once you get that, that's point number one, getting to that person's story.
Yeah.
So they identify the problem, then you get their story. Why is it I am reacting and responding to my body, my mind in this particular way, in this particular time? And then once you've done that, then it's just just really a set of psychological tools to see what works best for that individual. But the process of being heard, the process of being in a safe place where you can express those aspects of the self, that in itself allows the individual to, so to speak, join the dots. Join the dots to integrate within themselves, to bring those aspects of the self into the here and now, and to do it within the safety of the other, the therapist. So it allows that person to feel safe. It's incrementally and gradually more and more okay to be myself in this context. And ultimately, psychology is really simple. It's just about getting to know the self and being able to use the self in a way that's meaningful and helpful and kind and compassionate for themselves and the people that they live with. But that requires being able to hold the mirror up.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part for us as human beings, is to hold the mirror up and look at the self, warts and all. So for people, I could talk about many different cases, but ultimately the process is helping that individual do that, to integrate, to be able to become more present with my past, so my present, my future, and to notice when it's useful to engage with that and when it's useful to disengage with that and become more effective, present focused.
Yeah.
And there's many psychological ways to do it. Acceptance and commitment therapy help us to accept and be willing to have our experiences, but commit to refocusing and being effective, living a valued life, being mindful, notice when we drift, when we're hooked in our past, when we're hooked in our wounded self. Because if we're hooked in our wounded self, we're trying to, we're looking back, we're not going forward. Or I'm hooked in my present self, our future self. We can't drive, we can't be effective. So it's one way of noticing and learning to let go, and that involves also a lot of compassion. So compassion focused therapies, and then all these aspects of the self, where fundamentally we're not islands, we relate to self and other, and that background that we develop in, the caregiver background, helps us develop or not develop in a safe way. I'm okay, others are okay. And that attachment relationship with self and the world, often for many of us, that can get corrupted through our environment.
Yeah.
And to bring that to the surface is too painful. And a simple way I like to explain it is, it's like, those chocolate minstrel sweets, the Galaxy sweets, and you have the gooey chocolate tender bit that's protected by the little veneer sugar coating on the outside. But psychologically, that's what we're like as human beings. Often we have this gooey tender bit that we don't want to come in contact with anyone more, because we're made to feel that that's not okay, that person inside. And what we do is we try and protect and overcompensate and keep things from piercing that allow that gooey, sensitive, tender bit to come to the surface.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we can go through life going, I'm going to overcompensate.
Yeah.
Do too much, do too little, or I'm going to block it out, inebriate from it in some way. And then eventually, one of two things that happens is either three things: life, my body, or my mind.
Yeah.
Won't be able to do that in a sustained way when it comes to the surface.
Yeah.
And that's where people then go down the other routes of getting into avoidance cycles, depressive cycles, and then eventually wanting to give up. So to answer your question, the work that I've done with people that has been meaningful them has been allowing them to bring that to the surface, to notice, am I wound focused, or am I able to become wiser because of my history? To get, not to work through those grief, loss cycles, to become a wiser human being. And what that means is wiser for you as a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could talk all day about different skills and tools to be able to do that, but fundamentally, that's the destination, is how can I be a wise, compassionate human being that's able to function helpfully for self and for others.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And it's really fascinating talking to you because my journey was very much inspired by psychology initially. But the more I talk to you, the more I realise it's so linked with spirituality for me. You know, we have the out there, if you like, and you know, I did psychology at college, and then later I didn't do it. Well, my university degree was the social sciences behind the scenes, really, of the youth and community work profession. It was a professional degree. But then I started a psychology masters with so many questions about how it links to, you know, the whole well-being and holistic well-being. And I have to say, the 2 semesters I did before I left to have my daughter, I left with more questions than answers. But talking to you, it bridges so many more gaps for me in terms of how linked they actually are, because that's always been my resonance, is that, you know, our psychology is us, you know, and it's the keys to our wellness as much as our spirituality, and as much, you know, it's mind, body and spirit connection, which is what you're talking about and where you're coming from in your approach, isn't it?
And that's absolutely, but I would qualify that in saying that I'm pragmatic in my philosophical disposition. And what that means is truth is only useful if it's meaningful for me functionally. So there's other people that may argue that they want to get to the kernel of truth, the essence. If we keep drilling down, we'll get to the essence of truth about the universe, and the essence of truth about spirituality, and the essence of truth about God. That may never happen. I kind of take the approach of, do I want to spend my life drilling down, looking for kernels of truth, or do I want to live in a more functional, adaptive way that's meaningful for me? Because ultimately, if you read people that have been through tough times, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, there is no meaning. The meaning's, you know, when you look at yoga, there's nothing to do as a human being other than just to be here.
That presence, that now moment.
The only meaning is what we attribute to what we think is going to be useful for us. There is, in my opinion, for me, that's the meaning. The meaning is what you put into life, living. Why am I doing psychology? What's the meaning? What's the end purpose of that?
Yeah.
And because the rest of it is a psychological cage. And that's, in my opinion, that a lot of us get trapped in our psychological cage based on our histories, our language, our belief systems, what type of religion this, what type of religion that. It's just about a human being. And being a human being is that, this is my belief system, is that, and I think the bit that we're most scared of is the reality that there is no meaning, and actually we're all interconnected. The whole thing is interconnected, life, the world, the universe, and actually that's the scary bit. The scary bit is the potential that we have as human beings. When we let go, we need some structure. We need some freedom. The scary bit is how we can work within that and to see what happens.
Yeah.
The problem is, as human beings, we want control and structure, and that comes with a cost. It's like a budgie in a cage, and the door's open and it won't fly out because it doesn't know if it's free. You know, I've got responsibility to do something with that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I know the answer in any way, but that's the way the mind works, is a relation, freedom, constraint.
And it sounds like what you're saying and what I'm feeling is there's that it's about how we show up, how we feel, our mindset each and every day, isn't it? Because, you know, as we've discussed, there can be these distractions, there can be this endless search. And, you know, if we take meaning and we have meaning in ourselves and in our beliefs, that, you know, that's true for us, isn't it? So whatever what our belief system is our meaning. But it's also about
if it's working for you.
if it's working, yeah, exactly. And that's the
if
key
your
bit,
meaning is
isn't it?
hurting other people,
Yeah.
meaning that you're not being kind to your mother, father, son, daughter.
Yeah.
If it's making you rigid and inflexible, then you really got to question: is that a prison?
Yeah.
Or not?
Amazing. Yeah, it's fascinating. So while we're on the topic then, because we'll talk about your story a bit more after your next song, tools. So this is the thing, you know, in terms of people, we're talking about showing up each day. How are you feeling? How are you thinking? What's going on for you within that? You know, within that spectrum of freedom and constraints? What would be your sort of key takeaways from your own journey of what you've seen in all that time of professional experience and some of your own? Because we're never fully separate from that as people, are we? We're kind of growing alongside our work while we're in it. So your key takeaways from all that experience, and also kind of almost, I don't want to say like tips for the listener in a kind of
No pressure.
No pressure. Tools. So tools for the listener, and your kind of key takeaways in terms of. I know I'm really asking you to summarise it now.
That's a lot of pressure. I'm going to be honest with you. What I would say is there's a book by Van der Kolk, and I don't know if I say his name wrong there, but it's called The Body Holds a Score.
Oh, I know it. Yes.
But fundamentally, our reality is experienced through the body and in the mind.
Yeah.
And tip number one is starting to get to know both.
Yeah.
Start to use your body in a way, healthy way. Like, for example, I started doing yoga this last year, and as a way of starting to really appreciate and fall in love with my body again. Because I had a couple of shoulder surfing injuries and I was falling out of love with it. And there's other stuff, and it started to go, do you know what, I need to do differently towards my body, I need to relate to it. So learning to use your body in a healthy way will start bringing up you as a human being psychologically. And then the other part is getting to know yourself psychologically, stopping with the consumption of stuff and learning to sit and be with yourself. So sometimes I had one of my I go away for a week every year, you know, for a surf. And a 1 to 2 foot wave, I cried at the start of the week is perfect. And what I've noticed, by the time I get to Newquay a week later, I'm drinking a coffee and waiting for it to be 35 minutes to high tide or something. My brain is just notching it up, make it a little bit more perfect. And that process has allowed me just to become aware of our human disposition that we bring to every moment. And it's based on relation. It can all be good, better, bigger, smaller. We're constantly evaluating. So I would say my tips are: stop, get to know yourself, get to know your body. And the other thing that I would do is, or recommend, is the self-care. Usually our lives can make us come to a point where we feel like it's not okay for me to look and start to love myself. And that human beings can wait for a lifetime for their psychological brain to go, yeah, you're worth caring for.
Yeah, wow.
Or what we can do is actually, whether we believe we're worth caring for or not, we can take a step every day to do caring for ourselves. And paradoxically, it's like a seesaw. If we start behaving in a way that makes us care for each other, care for ourselves every day, even if we don't believe for it, like just be doing your nails, brushing your teeth, having a shower, over time, our brain is going to come to an equilibrium going, actually, I'm behaving in a way that's caring for myself, maybe worth caring for. And we can keep building on that. So my 2 tips would be: get to know the body, start working with the body, start to working with your mind, get to know your mind, start to care for yourself, whether you believe you weren't caring for or not.
I love that. I think that's really powerful, and I love how you've simplified it into those, key bits, body and mind, really.
Yeah.
It's just powerful stuff. Simple stuff usually is, isn't it?
But that's the hard bit.
Yeah. I love that. So we're going to have a little song break now, and we're going to hear some of the amazing Back and Air on a G-string, aren't we? So thank you, Django, for playing that one for us now.
Kind of sound, tuning in for change.
Welcome back to the Gifts Within Adversity with me, Stella Grace, and my incredibly experienced and lovely guest, Ian McKenna. We have been talking about all things psychology and more, and we've had some amazing, simple tips from Ian about wellness and well-being, and it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. We're going to talk a little bit about why you had that as your next song choice.
It's a song that my mum used to play, and it reminds me of just being in bed, usually hungover as a teenager.
Okay.
And there's something just visceral about the piano that it calms me, and it allows me to access aspects of feeling that I think I struggle to find. It's just really peaceful, and it reminds me of my mum, and it reminds me of home and being in my bed and safe. And just piano music it allows me to access different parts of myself that, particularly emotionally, that can be hard to get to.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. We touched on it just before with music being another tool of, wellness and supporting. Obviously, we've talked a lot about your fascinating work and how that structured approach to support within, that we have access to within our system. But there's so much more than that, isn't it? And you and I met surfing.
Yeah.
We actually met in the water, didn't we?
Yeah.
In our place of wellness,
Yeah.
in our place of, sanctuary and well-being, that I don't mind saying I need that for my mental health. And, physically, mentally, spiritually, actually, I need it for me. It's my time, and the water's my happy place. And, so it's very fitting and relevant that, I know we both are people who prioritise that self-care, because I know I'm better with it.
Yeah.
And my life is better with it. My children are better for it, having that time.
Absolutely.
Where I can kind of recalibrate and recharge. So,
Big time.
yeah, so it's quite ironic that we met in that way and are having this discussion now.
Yeah. The water does that to people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it really does. Would you like to share, Ian, as we're sort of starting to close the show today, your journey behind the scenes, if you like, that's led you to where you are today and led you to, support all the many, many people that you have and that you are still supporting?
Yeah, it's a long journey, but I'll try and condense it. I think really simply, I used to work as a telecoms engineer, and I think even before that, really simply I wanted to become a marine biologist. And I had this fantasy of living by the sea on a beach, doing experiments, and just being connected with life and nature. And I made decisions not to do that and done engineering. And I have a really good, close, long-term old friend that I studied with and worked with. And we travelled the world together, working. And he was just absolutely brilliant at it. And he just derived so much love from his work. And I think it became more apparent over the years we're working together going, I'm missing that. And then when I was about 23, I think it was. Yeah, 23. My brother drowned, and in a freak accident in an evening, and in Dublin, and he was with his friend, fell into a canal, slipped on an icy path, verge, and Well, the long and the short of it was his friend was there, got some help, got a fire brigade that was going past. My brother was down in a lock, canal lock, swimming away, and it was -1 or 2, it was frozen, and he was like, drop me down the road, drop me down the ladder. And the ambulance came from, or the fire brigade came from another person who tried to commit suicide, another side of the canal in Dublin, and they had no more ladders because they were trying to using it to get the other guy out. And then a really brave Garda, Irish policeman, came along and jumped down into the darkness, and they dropped the ladder down, and Adam was holding on to it actually, but it wasn't long enough to climb up, and he ended up dying of hypothermia. So through that process, it was just ironic because his friend was with him, the ambulance, the fire brigade was there. It was just the only way we can make meaning out of it was his time, for whatever reason. And that process I kept on, a good family, and we supported family, and we talked about it. But ironically, through music and through piano music, about 8 months later, bang, it all came up one day when I was standing in the kitchen listening to a song. And then I realised, gosh, I'm talking, but I need to get support here. And the short version is, through that process of counselling, talking about my brother, it just sounds cliche, but a light bulb went on, and I went, actually, this could be a really meaningful thing to do in my life, because it allowed me to join the dots and to go, actually, there's more. There's more and more meaningful things that I can do in my life than do my engineering. And that's when I started discovering psychology, and I worked as an engineer and studied in the evening times, tests like counselling and psychology. And the long and the short of it is, I went on from there, changed at 26, went back to university, done a degree in psychology, done a PhD in psychology, because I wanted to get into clinical health psychology, and that's not a guarantee. That's how it's a very small percentage that are lucky enough to make it into it. So I needed a backup, and then thank God I was offered the opportunity in Exeter, and trained, met a girl, bought a house, dragged her as far as close to the sea as I could, as she'd allow me.
Of course.
And the rest is history.
Oh, well, firstly, I'm so sorry for your phenomenal loss. It's huge, I'm sure, and it's really, really, inspiring and also sad hearing your story. So yeah, there's no pain like that, is there? And I don't mind sharing that. Actually, again, similarly, different circumstances, but my mum's chronic alcohol addiction was actually, in the long run, what inspired me to go into drugs work. And that you said, it's a little bit cliche, but yeah, I when I got asked the question at school by my teacher, what do you want to do when you're older? Which they asked then, generally you kind of might be like, what? But as a teenager, I was like, I want to help other people who are going through this. I didn't say this bit, I said, I want to help other people. And I was kind of alluring to a counselling role, and in my head thinking, I want to help people who are going through what I'm going through at home, because no one's helping me. And it was my harm, if you like, was very hidden, with a kind of functioning alcoholic dependent parent. So I just knew, and that was probably about 13.
Okay.
And it took me many years, and I had my own journey and my own adversities and my own real tricky times.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I knew at 13 that I would do that role of support for the people who were struggling with things I was struggling with, and to support those in addiction, because I'd wanted so desperately to support my mum and couldn't. Whatever I did, however I tried it, it was ultimately up to her, and she didn't crack it in that respect, and
It's hard.
It's hard, yeah. And I found her in very tragic circumstances when I was 19. She drowned in the bath. So so huge trauma. And whilst we would never choose, consciously or in our human mind on this lifetime, we wouldn't think, I'd go through that again to get to where I am. It's not that, but in hindsight, looking back, the inspiration for the gifts within adversity and the book topic that I'm writing is that you look back and you realise that as hard as things were and as horrendous as things were and as traumatic as things were at different points, you grow in such a way that you can see that there was gifts from those phenomenally traumatic events, or the way you've grown from them, the support you linked in with, the different, it's not even one thing, is it? It's really like you mentioned the word process. And I think it's that huge growth process that can really inspire. And it's a shame that it comes from such hardship, but there are so many gifts when down the line through the journey.
I think that's what those. Firstly, I'm sorry that you experienced that. That's really difficult.
Thank you.
And I think it's helpful to really integrate and make sense of that. Often is there a heal thyself process to it. But I think those are the gifts. I think my brother was really integrated. He really knew himself. He really knew his mind. And I think he was really happy within himself.
Wow.
And I think that it's ironic that we've met through water, and that I think there's something in that, there's something in that healing the self.
Yeah.
Because some cultures talk about the water being the mother, the nurturer. And there's something fundamentally energizing and humbling about the sea.
Absolutely.
That, I think it's really integrating back into the self, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It has so much nourishment, nurturing. It's the nature connection as well. It's that all of the opportunity for mindfulness. You were talking about the tools again, but you're only aware really of, there's the taste, touch, sense, the five senses again. It's back through the body, isn't it? And also, it's that focus of what the sea's doing, because it can be very humbling, and there's that safety aspect and the power element of it as well. So there's so much there, and I know we could talk for hours and hours, but we're going to have to wrap up the show. But it's been absolutely phenomenal. I'm so grateful for you and your time today and your amazing sharing of your stories and your wisdom and your knowledge. It's really, really, really very inspirational and very fascinating. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Stella. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Really lovely.
Great.
Cheers.
I'm so glad you've enjoyed it. We're going to finish with your last song choice, which is Guns N' Roses.
I'm going to have to explain why.
Yes.
Massive Guns N' Roses fan. It's kind of like music to my teenage life, but this song particularly reminds me of my friends, particular close friends in Ireland, and he forced me to sing this song for him, even though I've never sang live or even played anything. But as loyalty to him as a friend, I did it. And you know what? It was brilliant. It was absolutely a buzz, but it also reminds me of my partner and singing it for her on her second date, and just that connection of Guns N' Roses. So it is multifaceted.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. It's a lovely story to end on as well. Thank you, Django, for playing that one for us now. And I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time on the Gifts Within Adversity.